Welcome everyone to the work session of the Aspen City Council on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Our primary and only topic this evening is the Willoughby Park, and we're meeting with our Parks Department and others to overview that project and the work that we have going forward. So thank you very much, and just introduce yourselves and let's get going. Our colleague Christine is not here today. She had a long scheduled vacation as a one-time. And I actually am going to take just a half a second to update council on one other thing. I had noticed a bill going through the House, House Bill 251039, that was a muffler bill to require that commercial vehicles that have broken or disconnected their muffler be increased in fine from $500 a month to $1,000, not a month, a violation. And we checked with Kim Farber, and the Aspen Police Department, through their lobbying organization, had supported that bill. And I checked with Tara Nelson that it was within our policy agenda adopted, as well as existing municipal code, that you need to have a muffler, things like that, for noise and the quiet enjoyment. And the two sponsors were actually Dylan Roberts from the Summit County area, who often is very friendly to our issues, as well as Mark Catlin, our direct representative, and so in the Senate, and it has passed, and it's on its way to the governor's desk. So that may help us with some of the noise concerns that we all hear throughout the community, and especially off of Power Plant Road with the larger trucks. Thank you very much, and we'll go forward with your presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Mayor Richards. My name's Matt Kuhn. I'm Parks and Open Space Director.
And I'm Jen Phelan. I'm the Development Manager for the Capital Asset Department.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us tonight. We're looking forward to providing council tonight an update of a project that's been ongoing in this community for many years. The Parks and Open Space Department has been involved in this project since the early 2010s. In our file structure of all of our network files, it's at the top. It's the longest running project that hasn't come to fruition yet. But it's getting closer and closer every day, and that's why we're here tonight with you all, as it seems like it's right on the horizon. First and foremost, we'd like to provide you with some updates regarding our financial commitments from the Parks 100 Fund.
Okay. Grassroots, can you close your door while you're on the phone there? Thank you. It's okay.
And we'd also like to check in with you on a discretionary item for this project, which is the pool house conversion. We'll spend a little bit of time going over the background of this project. Even though it's been out in the community, there's a lot of details here, and it's a very kind of complex project. We'll provide a current update on the status as we understand it for construction on the various aspects, dive into the park's financial obligations, and we'll close with some council guidance and discussion.
So this project has five, I'd say, partners in this corridor project. We have the City of Aspen, which has a number of park parcels that will be consolidated through this project. We have multiple departments that have spent time, and as well as the boards on this project. We also have Aspen Skiing Company, which will be bringing in a new lift into this corridor. We have what was formerly known as Gorsuch House, currently owned by Oco Group, at the top of Aspen Street. We also have Lift One Lodge, which is basically located between Dean Street and just above Gilbert Street for that lodge development. The Aspen Historical Society is a partner in this project. With the relocation of the Skier Chalet Lodge down to Dean Street, that will be converted partially into a snow sports museum, and also ski coat ticketing and lockers. We have, as part of the park parcels, we have the DeLenzic family, which sold the DeLenzic parcel to the city, which made this whole corridor project feasible by allowing a skier return. And then the DeLenzic parcel has a deed restriction on it, and that is held by Aspen Valley Land Trust, so we have worked with them throughout this process.
Looking back, the early designs that Lift 1 Lodge developed did not change the lift location. You can see the image on the left here shows the lift terminal quite a ways up the hill. There was proposed a small platter lift that would move folks from Dean Street up to that location. And after some time, that was reworked and redrawn to the approved plan that's shown on the right. That brings all of those partners that Jen just mentioned together in collaboration, trying to really check as many boxes as possible on this project.
So the background on this project encompasses a number of parcels that go from basically Dean Street up to the current Lift 1A, where Aspen Street terminates. It includes a new telemix lift and base area, essentially in what is Willoughby Park, in the parking lot area of it today. The new telemix, the loading platform, will actually be essentially in the original position and location of original Lift 1A, or excuse me, original Lift 1. So people will be loading where skiing started in Aspen.
What is a telemix lift as opposed to a quad or something?
Sure. Telemix, they also call it a chondola, but a telemix is a mix of gondola cabins and chair lifts.
Thank you.
So we also have a number of buildings that will be rehabilitated in this project. The existing skier chalet lodge, which is on Gilbert Street, as I mentioned, will be brought down to Dean Street and converted to uses for both Ski Co. And the Historical Society, the ticketing office that I mentioned for the base area, operated by Ski Co., and a snow sports museum that will be operated by the Historical Society. The Skier Chalet Steakhouse will be brought basically in the similar alignment as today. It'll be brought down a little closer to Dean Street, though. That's going to be converted into or renovated into a new restaurant. The original Lift 1 will be rehabilitated. The gantry will be brought closer to Dean Street in the same alignment, so you'll still see kind of the original loading lift and with a tower, and then 2 towers will be relocated onto Aspen Mountain, and 2 hotels will be developed within the corridor with a skier lane return down in between these lodge buildings.
We have one question now, and I realize I interrupted with a question, but if anybody else has one directly, then I'll take it, but otherwise we'll try to hold our questions through at least this part of the background presentation. John?
I guess my only comment, or it's not really a question, is when you say restoration of original Lift 1 towers and gantry, shouldn't it be relocation and restoration?
Mike.
Sorry.
So it's multifaceted. They'll be taken off the site, rehabilitated. We have a study already on what needs to be done to bring them up to rehabilitate those structures, and then they get relocated. So the Lift 1 gantry is relocated with one of the towers in alignment of the telemix, so a little bit closer to Dean Street, but in original alignment of the corridor. And there wasn't room for 2 of the lift towers, so those will be located on Aspen Mountain in, again, alignment of the original Lift 1 corridor.
Thank you. I guess the reason I bring it up is just the fact that you alluded to it, but the historic structure is being moved from its historic location to a different location.
Yes.
I do appreciate it's in the same alignment, but just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jen.
Okay.
So that last bullet point there showed that there's better connectivity across various park spaces. Starting here in the top left showed the previous condition of park spaces and Lift One Lodge property in the vicinity of Willoughby Park. There were three distinct parcels: Willoughby Park, Lift 1A Park, and the Delinzik property. With Ordinance 38, which was approved by the voters in 2019, it changed that to a way that you see finally in the bottom right. And effectively, there are two parcels now. And I want to make that distinction because it's important that we differentiate Delinzik from the Lift 1 and Willoughby corridor. Generally, while Delinzik does allow skiing to go across it, none of the lift infrastructure, none of the hard infrastructure goes onto Delinzik Park. So you can see this somewhat heavy black line here differentiates that boundary. And all of the lift infrastructure and snowmaking infrastructure generally stays off that property.
And on this photo, the right-hand side is Upper Mountain?
Correct. So this would be towards Aspen Mountain on the right, and this is Dean Street on the left. So downhill on the left.
Thank you.
As Jen mentioned, we're very grateful that the Delinzik family sold at a bargain price their parcel to the city of Aspen. That occurred in 2014, and that opened some doors that allowed re-envisioning how Lift One Lodge and the Willoughby Park interface all kind of connected. Working with parks representatives and all those project stakeholders that you saw earlier, a re-envisioned and unified design was presented, and I think we've touched on that in pretty significant detail. I do want to point out that the park was dedicated in 2023, and while generally there won't be a lot of work occurring in the skiway, there will be a significant number of trees that are removed in order to create the skiway and work on that lift infrastructure immediately adjacent to there. So in this photograph in the background here, those trees that are on the back border, the west border, turn into a ski trail.
So we just wanted to let you know where the project is currently. Lift One Lodge submitted their building permit in March 2023. They're anticipating issuance of a phased building permit. They are thinking that they'll be able to do some limited infrastructure work this summer, fall of this year. And we're anticipating construction likely to begin in 2026. Gorsuch House, which is owned by OCO Group, they submitted a building permit in January of 2025. Currently, they are working with Lift One Lodge on finalizing a construction and sequencing agreement. The status with Aspen Historical Society and Aspen Skiing Company, we are having monthly stakeholder meetings. We also are having side meetings depending on the topic. SkiCo is working with Lift One Lodge on details for construction of the new lift. They don't have a building permit in. They're working with them on coordination and making sure all the pieces come together. Historical Society is working with there's probably a better word for this, but a museum designer who is working with them on developing the program for the building and what they'll need to do for a tenant finish for their part of the project.
Okay.
Also, we can note here in conversations with Aspen Skiing Company, they're working on their commitments for the lift. The lift is their responsibility, and they've confirmed with us that they are allocating and planning for the funding of that component, which is a significant amount of money. to occur in concert. So let's jump into where this is going with parks and open space. Again, highlight that this is an ordinance, so we have a 35-page ordinance that guides a lot of our requirements and decisions. And within that, it highlights something that's really important. This slide makes that distinction, and I want to start with this. So this image on the left, you can see there's no overlays. This is a view looking at Dean Street, the improved Dean Street. Skiers Chalet, the ski museum and ticketing is on the left. The steakhouse is on the right. You can see the new lift bottom terminal kind of in the middle here where my mouse is. Plaza staircase and plaza. On the right here, you can see two different colors of overlay on this same image, orange and green. The orange section is for, as the ordinance states, public-facing improvements on Dean Street. That is where the city has placed $4.36 million in escrow, and it's sitting there waiting to be conveyed to the developer as a contribution for those components. The other stuff in green is spelled out in a different section of the ordinance, and it states that improvements to the city park, including hardscaping and landscaping related to the Dean Street Plaza, stair to ski level, the pool house restroom, etc., are the responsibility of the Parks and Open Space Department. As I highlighted in my memo, unfortunately, the cost of these improvements weren't contemplated by the ordinance, and they are representing a significant amount of money for our Parks Fund. And this is not new to us. We've been showing this in budgets for City Council since 2021. We placed a placeholder actually in 2025 this year, way back then, for $1 million towards those costs of the park improvements. Each year, we look at that number and try to align it with where we are in our knowledge of the project and refine details. In 2025, we showed $1.5 million over 2 years, so a total contribution of $3 million. And again, this year, we're refining in the capital planning process, which we're in right now, what those final numbers are going to be. As you know, cost of construction continues to escalate each and every year in Aspen. But I do want to highlight that the reason we're putting a little bit more scrutiny and focus on the funding this year is that it's coming up, and also that it's starting to overlap with potential softening of sales tax related to the airport closure in 2025. And so with finance's direction, our budget is representing that, and with these larger commitments, it just forces us as staff to really focus on where we're spending our money. There are several components that I'd like to touch on of our commitments. The first and foremost, and the one for discussion a little later, is the pool house. This is the historic pool house adjacent to the former Skiers Chalet. It's a relatively small building. It's 375 square feet. Within the ordinance, Lift One Lodge is required to relocate it and bring utilities to it. Unlike the Skiers Chalet, they're not required to bring it to a white box scenario, and so there will be a significant amount of work involved with shoring this building up and making those improvements to turn it to a public restroom. We're working with Charles Cuniff Architects. Based on their estimations, we're in the 800 to 1,200 a square foot, which brings us at the high end at 600,000 plus any escalations annually. There was a question previous to this meeting about the annual cost of maintenance. From a labor perspective, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $25,000 annually for staff labor associated with this restroom specifically. We absolutely can look into state historic grants. I don't know if this scale of project where it ranks within prioritization, but it's something that we're speaking with our grant consultants to keep on their radar. I do want to touch on real quickly that we're anticipating that if this were turned into a public bathroom over the winter months, maintenance and upkeep would be performed by Aspen Skiing Company. Many of the areas that are on Willoughby Park were contemplating through maintenance agreements and operating agreements that those are handed over to Aspen Skiing Company for their maintenance and care in the winter and handed back to parks in the summer for our maintenance and care. Those agreements are penciled out, but they're not formally signed, I don't believe, at this juncture. They're a stipulation of the CO. They're correct, they're in draft. In the Parks and Open Space Department, we employ spreadsheets like you see here to quantify and estimate labor and operating expenses. Willoughby Park as a whole, so from those high levels on the hill all the way down through the plaza, we anticipate that the cost of those annually at this juncture is around $120,000 a year. That's everything from mowing the grass and maintaining the irrigation systems to paying water bills. It comprises approximately 3,000 hours of labor. That's more than one FTE, as you can imagine. So think of this new park space upon its improvement and commissioning is going to probably take about 2 new employees to maintain at our standards. We did forecast these expenses way back in 2018, and we've seen a bit of inflation. As you can guess, that's not representing that 98 to 118,000 is not representing full inflation, and that's because since that original forecast, we have recognized that Aspen Skiing Company likely will be maintaining these spaces in the winter, which has about a $20,000 to $30,000 savings to the city in those budget forecasts. There was also some questions we received beforehand regarding how this affects other priorities in the department. And I'd ideally like to not get into too many specifics on that for 2 reasons. One, because we're still in the process of solidifying our capital plan. In fact, we haven't even reviewed it with the city manager's office and the agency director team. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse there. But I do want to highlight that there are a number of priorities out there in the community. In March of this year, we met with our Open Space and Trails Board and had some in-depth conversations with them about priorities. This graphic here on the right shows where our Open Space and Trails Board is highlighting and prioritizing in descending order projects that are on our radar for the next 5 years. Those include the yellow brick playground replacement, which is probably our largest, most used playground right next to Heron Park. The ABC to Brush Creek Trail project, which we are shorthanding here, the Twin Bridge project. There is a anticipated project for improving the driving range and snowmaking at the Aspen Golf Course. Just outside the window behind me here is improvements to Galena Plaza that have been anticipated since this City Hall was built. And finally, the last I'll mention is the Truscott Trail, which is on the south side of Highway 82, connecting Buttermilk to Truscott, utilizing the old Maroon Creek Highway 82 bridge. I do want to highlight, as a quick review for council, that our fund has taken on the maintenance expenses for recreation facilities, the rec center, Aspen Ice Garden, Red Brick Rec Center. Those in this working draft graph here show that they ebb and flow between parks having the lion's share of capital funding to the recreation facilities utilizing more funding. And so I do want to highlight in 26, we are anticipating a pretty concentrated focus for the rec facilities at the Aspen Ice Garden and at the rec center. We are taking a relatively light approach this year and next year on parks capital projects, getting ready for these bigger projects down the pipeline. We're anticipating potential revenue related to the fees, park dedication fees for these two projects between $800 and $1 million. So that's revenue that's not yet forecasted in our long-range plans, but something that likely will benefit our fund, considering that we're going to be spending these funds to support the project. There was some questions about what we're doing in '25 for capital. We have improved the sand at Coke Park, as you've likely seen out and about in the community. We have an in-depth project to replace all the interpretive signs throughout our project, or all of our parks and trails. We're continuing to partner with Asset on the Connor Park redesign, and we have some grant-funded improvements at Cozy Point Ranch. So, in short, that's the summary of the upcoming projects, our anticipated expenses, and we're here to answer any questions you have and open the discussion at this time.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You may have noted that when I read the memo, I asked a number of questions to kind of round out the presentation as a whole. It's important to me to really understand where this project sits with other community priorities and our capacities going forward. So there may be new questions that people have coming from some of that information, but let's go back for just a second, Matt. What is the ask of council today for direction, both the direction on the pool house conversion and the understanding of the total allocation that you would be making over time to the public lands of this project?
That's correct. So number one, we'd like to confirm that this is a high priority project for us to work around. That's important as we go into these meetings and finalizing our operating plans. Staff feels that based on the ordinance, based on the municipal election, that this is a commitment. So we want to bring you up to speed and confirm that it is. That means that you will start to see expenses occurring in 2026 with bringing on an owner's representative, as well as adjusting our financial allocations to that number here shown in green, which is 4.579 for total project allocation over those next 3 years, 26, 27, and 28. The second question for council is to advise us on whether or not to proceed on converting the pool house to a public restroom. It is discretionary. We can convert that to a shed and make very little improvements and have that potentially $500,000 to $600,000 in fund savings. We could delay that component and do that at a later date. We do think it probably is in our interest to turn it into a public restroom, but that is a discretionary item for consideration. So those are the two items.
Thank you very much. That's very thorough. What I'd like to do, council, is start with questions that we may have and then lead into comments so that we have any other questions we have about the project answered. Bill?
Thanks. First question, Matt, is it accurate that this one lodge has been in for a building permit for over 2 years now? Is that what I saw on your slide?
They submitted an initial building permit in end of March 2023.
And could we maybe, this could be a follow-up to this meeting, but could we get some detail on what that 2 years has looked like? You know, how long has this been sitting with the applicant versus with the city?
And what change orders they've made? Or
Yeah, if any, what detail is there? You know, at first blush, that obviously feels like a very long time, but I know there's usually some story behind these things, and one of the reasons I ask, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I ask is, you know, are these, what I'm curious about is Lift 1 construction going to be concurrent with Amman construction or not, based on how long it might take to review this and approve it?
It's actually, we can come back with those details. I don't have them. But what I do want to touch on that question, and this image really highlights it, this is an incredibly complex site. Everything that you essentially see in this image is excavated and is built, becomes the parking structures, including the public park. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that the public park is going to be resting on top of structure. It's a green roof that has a host of complexities, especially when you're attaching a very substantial lift mechanism to the top. To my knowledge, that's never been done, but maybe somewhere else. So there is a lot of complexity with the excavation, structural, lift, all of that. I suspect that's a component of a lengthy review process, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I can imagine a lot of utilities and sewer and water and everything else there too. Drainage, that's a sensitive area during excavation to prevent any sort of mudslide activity, which was a concern when the Ritz-Carlton was, which is now the St. Regis, was being constructed. Bill, you have follow-up
Yes,
questions?
please. What kind of subgrade space will be under that park? And who's responsible for maintaining the green roof and that space? Whose space is that underneath that you just described?
So all of the substructure is Lift 1 Lodge, and I believe it's condominiumized.
It will be condominiumized. One part of the subgrade structure will be the employee locker room for SkiCo. There will also be 50 public parking spaces in that subgrade garage for the public. And it will be condominiumized.
The surface of the structure is the park's responsibility. And that's a great question. And it's within the memo, I didn't mention it during the presentation. As part of Ordinance 38, Lift 1 Lodge is required to bring the soil composition to a standard. Beyond that, it is our responsibility. I don't recall off the top of my head how it's contemplated should membranes or other aspects of the structure fail, whose responsibilities those are. That's something we can look back at some of those agreements, maintenance agreements, and come back to you on.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand because it's not an if, it's a when. 100% guarantee that will leak at some point in time. So, and the more trees that are on there and the more lift infrastructure that's on there, the more complicated the repair and replacement will be. We should be thoughtful about that, for sure. Do you have some kind of graphic that might show us where other nearby publicly accessible restrooms might be?
I don't have a graphic to share, but I can tell you the closest is Wagner Park.
Sorry, Matt, let me rephrase it. Other restrooms that are adjacent to this park that would be quasi-publicly available?
Ticketing office, the ticket office for SkiCo will have restrooms. The historical museum will have restrooms. How open that is to the public is not totally clear at this point. And then, I mean, if you think about the different lodges will have restaurants, et cetera, so those will also have some semi-access.
I'm going to ask sort of the most philosophical question of my fellow council members first, and then I'm going to ask some follow-up questions. But the question I want you to be thinking about the question I request you think about as I ask these follow-up questions is this shed worth saving at all? Is this something that's valuable to our community?
It's historically designated.
I understand that, but we can unhistorically designate it, I believe. So I want you to think about that.
Okay.
So my first question is, Jim, is that correct that we can unhistorically designate a structure?
I'd have to look at the ordinance itself. I don't think we can unilaterally do it with cooperation of various parties. We might be able to, but I think everybody would have to agree. But I haven't reviewed that aspect of the ordinance that either designated it or got this move approved. So, I'm
Those
sorry.
cooperating agencies you're talking about might be who?
Might be Lift One, it might be the Historic Society, it might be the ski company. And that would probably be it in the city,
Anyone involved with this?
yeah. I don't think Gorsuch House would be involved in that.
Thanks, Jim. And lastly, on this slide, Matt, are we, I'm sure the answer is yes, but are we certain that these quote-unquote public-facing improvements that you have outlined in orange cannot be used for any of the inside the green components, and what are these public-facing improvements?
So, and Jim too, it's really a legal interpretation. I spoke with our city attorney, Kate Johnson, multiple times on this. Latest was last Wednesday. Her interpretation is that Section 32, the cost sharing, is fairly specific, that the fixed amount of $4.36 million is in support of those public-facing elements of the project, such as Dean Street and the Skier Chalet, and that as the ordinance was contemplated, it really was specific to those two things. There is some language there that could be up for interpretation, but her interpretation is that it's fairly specific that Parks Fund is responsible for these other components in green.
Okay, and then the public-facing improvements, again, did you just say Skier Chalet when you were describing that? What are we doing for Skier Chalet?
We aren't.
What are we paying for?
The Lift One Lodge is bringing it down, so they're relocating it down to the park. They'll be handing that building in a white box condition to the city, and the city will then hand it over to Ski Co. and the Historical Society. So that was an obligation of Lift One Lodge in the approvals. So they're talking about that rehabilitation as street publicly facing elements, because it'll be a museum and ticketing office. They mentioned in the ordinance specifically the Dean Street corridor, which has improvements of changing it to a one-way street, adding pedestrian and bike mobility in there. The other thing that I didn't mention that I do think is public-facing too is Lift One Lodge is also responsible, in addition to all the infrastructure on Long Dean, they are responsible for rehabilitating Lift One and the towers, which are historic resources that sit in the city park today.
Okay, and specific to the funding, is it contemplated currently that some dollar amount will be transferred to the Historic Society to cover their build-out? So what financial element of the Skier Chalet is the city contributing to?
The ordinance simply states that we're contributing a fixed amount towards a portfolio of things. So think of it that it doesn't specifically call out whether that's more Dean Street or more white box of the Skier Chalet building or sidewalk improvements. I don't know that we've done any calculations, but my hunch is that the costs of those public-facing improvements that are specific to that 4.36 the value of those far exceed the contribution from the city. So it was something that was negotiated as the ordinance was prepared.
Okay, understood. But is it accurate to say that as of today, as it's contemplated today, the city is not contributing dollars specifically towards the Skier Chalet project?
It's contributing a pot of money.
4.36 is contemplated as compensation for that effort.
Your microphone, Jim.
Forgot I turned it off. The 4.36 million in that escrow is contemplating compensation to Lift One Lodge for those efforts and
So the
for
436 is in its entirety is being transferred to Lift One in
Correct.
exchange for some of the things that are being.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm sorry I didn't understand that.
And it's transferred at a certain point in time. So the only way that Lift One Lodge receives those funds is when completion of a new ski lift such that is in working condition is when those funds can be transferred over to Lift One Lodge. So they don't get any dollars until there's a new lift
That's
ready to be
super helpful for me to
operational.
understand.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let me just ask that post this meeting, we have a little bit more of a detailed list of those specific uses of those dollars, as we understanding they go towards a portfolio, but perhaps what the obligations are before the funds are released and what we would expect to see from that. So as we look at this project in the future, we will have this. I really appreciate you drilling down on those levels of detail.
That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Who would like to go next with questions?
I don't really have questions, just comments.
Okay, Sam?
I just want to say thank you for all this information. It's the first time in a long time we've really talked about this. And as far as the questions you're sort of posing towards us, I almost like put them back towards you and say, when you talk about like these financial responsibilities, this is your department and this is your budget. You feel comfortable with the scope of work and the amount given all the things you have going on. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. See, and then as far as the bathroom or the pool house goes, is your belief that a bathroom is the best use of that building? You only described a shed as the other alternative. Obviously, that's cheaper, but once again, we're talking about your budget and your priorities. But you think a bathroom is the best use of that building?
I think it is a,
Public restroom.
I think it is a good use of the building. We've not contemplated alternative uses beyond those two. I will say that we're in the midst of 15 months of working on a strategic plan for our department, and across the board, in all of our conversations, public restrooms that are not portable toilets come up darn near the top of the list of what people would like to see improved in our parks. So recognizing that this is going to become a very vibrant corner of the community, especially in the summer, I could see that being an amenity that's used. Bill's question is really pertinent, that there are other restrooms available there, but should there be, a small concert or some other use of the space, I could see those restrooms being used in the summer. In the winter, I think they're very important. I think they do benefit the skiing operation to have a restroom that's not downstairs in a ticket building. However, it might prove to be a burden for SkiCo as well. So it's certainly something that the community would support, is my guess.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, just Matt, if I can, one other dynamic that I think is a very real possibility is that this new public park, it's going to be on our inventory for rentable parks. So the possibility of special events and park rentals, those kind of uses lend themselves to having a public restroom there as well. So yet to be determined how much use we'll see there, but it's another dynamic that we have to consider.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The only follow-up is, you said 375 square feet, and I'm trying to picture, are we talking about, like, to be honest, two single toilets, male and female, or like, what do you think you can squeeze into that space as far as public restrooms go?
I don't have the drawing. I didn't put the drawings in
Yeah.
memory. If memory serves me, it's 3 stalls on the women's side, and on the men's side, it's 2 urinals and a stall.
Okay, so enough. It's not, I was just making sure it wasn't just one at a time. I thought that would be kind of
No,
funky for such a high trafficked area. Yeah, that's all my questions. I mean, I don't think we're dealing with the most controversial part of this. I think you're asking us to approve what you think is best, so. Yeah.
Thank you. I do have a whole series of questions. Hopefully, they're relatively quick, and appreciate your really putting together a lot of information for us. And I'm not sure they're in a particular order here, but any of the trees from the Dolinsky Park, can they be relocated? Or they're just a tree removal?
I'd have to refresh my memory. However, I would presume that most of them, if not all, are removals.
Okay, and I just
we
thought that
do-
might be the case. They looked fairly large, so I was just wondering.
They are quite large, and just for council's edification, generally, relocations are unsuccessful. We do, in certain instances, try it, especially when it's a little bit in the size that we can transport it. However, it's usually 50-50 on whether those survive.
Okay. Is there a comprehensive construction management plan adopted yet for making these multiple complex projects work together?
So I'm just going to talk about the lodges right now. Each lodge with their building permit application needs to submit a construction management plan. The ordinance approving this project requires a construction sequencing agreement. We have a draft one in place that was finalized, but again, just as a draft. Lift-One Lodge cannot get a building permit until it is updated and signed by the parties. They're working on that now. You come up with a sequencing agreement, but you're pretty far out from construction. So as you get closer to actually putting a shovel in the ground, things get a lot more real, along with timing and the ability to coordinate. So that's being worked on and updated currently, but we don't have that in hand yet.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that we would take a look at some of the state historic fund for grant opportunities. You're right, the pool house by itself may seem insignificant to them, but I think if it's really positioned within the context of the skier chalet and the ticket office as, a complex of buildings being saved, it may receive something. And again, even if it's a minor contribution, I think that's important. And I think to my answer to your question, Bill, is I do think as a complex of historic buildings and truly honoring the history of that area, and I've seen them show up in a number of photographs in our Historical Society archives, I would personally think they're worth saving. I don't think, that's the direction we should take with this sort of renovation. When we get to the summer uses of the park, that is something I think needs a little more drilling down on. And I think it's great that we're adding more flush toilets to our parks and not porta potties. So, maybe we start to look at a bit of a differential rental rate when they have those sort of facilities that will require more maintenance. And I don't know that we've done that now, but if your board could take a look at that, I think it'd be valuable. That's a bigger part of the cleanup post-event, and even maintenance during some of the larger events. In terms of the parkland itself, I think it's really important that the landscaping design as it goes forward takes a couple of different things into account. One is the issue that Bill has already brought up, and that is what the roof can really hold. And we have the Galena Street Plaza example as it's leaking into the parking garage in the past. And does that mean that you have trees more in some of the planter type of containers that can only grow so big before they are moved and relocated and new trees are brought back in? Or, not trees that are going to, eventually go through the infrastructure. It's just really important, and that we don't have to water deeply to see successful plant growth. And so I think really taking our time with what is planted there. I'd love to see us really stick to a type of native wildflower and not necessarily beds of petunias and, this is not mall planting type of things. I mean, maybe some for fresh color, but it should be more of perennials and the wildflowers and the lupines and columbines and things that will take care of themselves if they're successfully maintained, as opposed to having to buy fresh plants every year in large quantity and things like that. So I think that we really need to give a lot more thought to what a living garden is over this. And You know, certainly there's a lot of cities that are doing green roofs and things like that now, so there should be some good examples for us there. But I would look to what is low maintenance as a priority on that. The other thing, I want to make sure that this has a sense of public use, not privatization, which is hard because it's sandwiched between the two hotels, you know, and in the summer when you're looking up, you'd have to tell someone that it's there. You know, when you're skiing, you see it, that it's there. You know, you're above it all the time. But if you're from down below, you know that this opens into this incredible park area. And I don't want it to feel like it's the private property of the hotels or it's just the hotel's backyard. And I like the idea that we might be able to have some real activations there and think about what's appropriate. What could we have there for activation? I mean, that's one of the things our whole community is talking about, of community gathering places where community as a whole wants to be. And so that is a design element I know you're very well versed in and do a great job with. The other thing that I really think about a little bit is your future projects list. And, you know, we all wish list a lot of things that we'd like to see done and go forward and have big price tags. And what I'm wondering is if we could think in a way that's a little more pieces of those projects advancing. So it's not we have to do everything all at once for the Galena Plaza, or everything all at once for Cozy Point, or everything all at once, and then have these big price tags. But is there a way that are there incremental improvements that will enliven the Galena Plaza more, or some of our other community spaces? And so it's just a slightly different way of thinking about these given the cost constraints. And that's not a question to be answered, but just something to contemplate. Are there pieces of the other projects that lay the groundwork for, again, future years, but don't leave something sitting 8 years out before they get any improvements at all, type of thinking. And again, I'll just go back one last time, but the surface drainage of that park, how does it really drain? That has got to be a #1 planning priority. I think that's pretty much all the questions I have for this work as you've presented it. And I really appreciate the additional background that you've given us as the project as a whole. I'll just say we all know that this was a controversial project within the community. There are strong feelings on either side of it. It's part of a new, modern Aspen that, to my mind, respects the past and is part of a lot of changes that we're all experiencing. You know, when you talked about the history of it, I was not on council or connected with it at the time, but during Mayor Ireland's time, there was a large multi-year design process that went forward and eventually kind of really failed to reach a conclusion. I think Mick himself didn't vote for it, feeling it would not pass a public vote, and some of the base of the area, instead of being lodging, became second homes, and it did not activate the area at all. The concern over growth and impact on our community is ever present. But this was approved by the voters. Planning work has been done, and there are entitlements that these properties have secured. And so I think that is, you know, sometimes depending on which side of the issue on, it's making the best of what is and what will be. I think the construction management plan aspects are really important for the disruption of our community, because that's going to be something that goes on for years and outliving any one of us on this council, quite likely. And it's important that the product that comes out of it is something that the whole community is proud of. And I can only really think back to the red brick for myself. And when that vote was so controversial and only passed by 3 votes, as to success. And at the end of the day, after the restoration and the kids were back in the gym and community artists were showing in the hallway, a few people who were pretty adamantly opposed came back to me and said, you know, it turned out a lot better than I thought. And, you know, I'm really okay with it. And, you know, maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, but that's what I'd hope for. Thank you. I think we're leading into comments now, as I just did. So, John, you've been patient and waiting. I'll let you go first, and then we'll come back around to the bigger question about, and it really is about these guys working that second number in green into your future budget years. And so that will be the question we're coming back to, as well as the pool house.
Okay, I'd just like to start by saying, I saw a lot of images tonight about the development that I'd never seen before, and they're great images, but I got to say the scale's even larger than I anticipated. It's kind of shocking. And I know it's nobody's fault here, and I know we have had a public vote on the hotels, and we're not going backwards, we're going forwards, but got to say I'm disappointed that $4.5 million wasn't foreseen to change an existing park into a better park. I think if that was foreseen during the election, we might have had a different outcome because of the other $4.36 million that was asked for by the developers, and the council at that time decided that they would go forward with that. I was going to ask if the Ski Co. or one or both hotels could pay for annual maintenance of the restroom, if that's what we decided, but that question has been answered. I would like to know what the square footage of the ski company's locker room at the base of the gondola is, because that seems to be a nice size for people to store their things, and it gets a lot of use, and I'm sure I just think that 375 square feet might be too small for what we really need at the base of 1A.
Wait a second. I think the 375 is the size of the pool house restroom.
Yeah.
But you're asking the size of the ski locker in the ticket building, and was that for just Ski Co. employees, or
The ski
I got
locker
confused.
building is in the basement. It's in the actual parking structure, and we can provide that number in a follow-up email.
No, understood. Maybe I wasn't clear. The ski company's gondola, where the public restrooms are at the gondola building, below the stairs, they have like lockers and cubby holes and a men's and women's restroom and a place to sit down and put your ski boots on. And I think that that's probably larger than 375 square feet, but I'm not sure. But I anticipate that if we were going to have a public restroom at the base of 1A, that it should have something like that, if the ski company doesn't have something like that in their ticket office.
So in the ticketing office, will be bathrooms in a locker room, a public locker room.
Okay.
I don't know the size of it off the top of my head. I didn't look at it, but I can get that.
Okay. Well, I imagine then if that's already being proposed, then this would probably be enough for, 375 would be enough for a men's and women's public bathroom. I would like to see that historic structure saved. And the last thing I have to say is the excavation work on this project is definitely going to be impacting the Castle Creek Bridge, and we should be conscious of that moving forward. Thanks for your hard work.
Yeah.
This is a complicated project.
That's a great point, given the lifespan and the total dependence on the bridge the community has. It may be worth talking or thinking about how full each truck can be. I mean, that's about all I think we can really talk about. And whether any of the soils or excavation can be reused within town, I don't know that. It'd be nice to know where the dirt is going to be, and the subsurface is not really dirt. It's not, or it's dirt, but it's not soil, put it that way. Where it's going to be loaded to and how it's going to be used. In the past, there's been some really bad Highway 82 road cuts that have been revegetated with soils. I don't know if the golf course is looking to more hills anymore, but, John?
I just want to point out that it's estimated that 10,949 dump truck loads full of fill will be coming out of that hole, and that is a lot of fill.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. Bill?
Thanks. One thing I meant to ask, where is that restroom building gonna go?
It is right here in the corner, adjacent to the Ticket and Historic Museum building.
Will it be visible from Dean Street, or is the museum gonna obscure?
So this is the entrance to the parking garage. I suspect when you are east or directly north of the entrance to the parking garage, you will see that structure as you're descending into the space. There is a vegetation buffer area between the top of the parking garage entrance, but I think my suspicion is yes, you can see it. You would not be able to see it from these areas because it'll be blocked by a skier chalet.
So on this larger picture, is it right about here? Or is it
Correct.
over there?
That
Right
first
there?
location, yep, right there.
So up above, this is the entrance, and then it'd be above that
That's correct.
green. Okay.
So currently, this is up here, and the shed is just behind it, just like that, except that those two buildings are up here now. Is that correct?
Yeah, currently the skier chalet lodge is on Gilbert, and directly behind it is the pool house. And the pool house is going to be relocated again behind.
There you can see it,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So it's this, you'll see it there.
it's interesting because right now in the artistic rendering, all the greenery covers that building. I was just kind of wondering, will it be the historic character facing towards the lift as people come down, or facing towards Dean Street where's the back of the building gonna be, or do we make both sides the front, kinda?
So the front entrance historically is right here. And let me get to that slide. That is from the plaza perspective. So this top right image, what's interesting about the building, you'll note that it's very short.
Yeah.
And so we're currently working with the architect and in collaboration with our partners at CommDev to determine the best approach. But we're keeping the historic face. However, the access to the restrooms will be on either side. So one on that side and one on this side.
So if you were a skier, would you have to come down steps to use that restroom, or it's up above?
It'll
so
be slope side.
It will be slope side. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
In the summer, you'd have to go up steps.
Unless you were coming down from the park. You're already
There's-
in the park.
There's, I think, 3 steps.
Because of snow.
3 steps because of the size. I got you.
Because of the snow.
The lift.
Yeah.
The lift to it, okay. But not the whole set of steps.
Thank you.
Okay.
So it's right next to this building that also has restrooms, right?
That's correct.
This is where I'm coming from. I love historic structures. I've restored a lot of historic homes. I'm passionate about this part of our community. There is no way this is $800 to $1,200 a square foot. We're gonna spend at least twice that. At least, easily 3 times that could happen, to put restrooms into this building. That's after someone else pays to relocate it. There's just no question in my mind that this is way more than what you've got budgeted. And that's not an accusation on you, it's just reality. I'm not blaming you for that. That is the reality of what this thing is gonna cost to do. It's going to be completely reconstructed from the inside. The building code's gonna require insulation upgrades and this was contemplated as an uninsulated pool house. This is not designed for this use, obviously. That's clear to everyone. And I'm wondering if there's just a smarter approach to do some agreement so that the restrooms in the building that's right next to it can be used for park purposes, and accessed for that purpose, and then use this as a shed. If everyone feels strongly about the historic character of this, I don't think it's gonna have much historic character once you put it up on a new foundation. and create this new doorway, I think it's gonna look really quite goofy, is my personal opinion. So I'm not really attached to this building, and I don't think it's, I think it would look a lot better as a shed where we didn't lift it up onto this fake foundation and just left it there and used it as a shed. And would obviously cost a lot less. We could use some of that money for some kind of maintenance or sharing agreement with Skico, if that's who's going to be responsible for the restrooms in the skier chalet building. I just think we're sort of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here. I think I respect the interests of preserving the historic asset. So I think we should sort of bifurcate the discussion just to make sure that we're not crossing feelings on those two things. But I can totally respect and even offer a better solution for the historic asset of keeping it as a shed, because it will look better as a shed and more authentic, I think, than this restroom concept, and then work out something with the restrooms next door. That would be my proposal.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, but I also can see that the Historic Ski Museum just might not be open all that many hours and have personnel in there to have that. I also would like to see a lot of activation in that space, and so I think that will require restrooms. I mean, I'll be honest, I thought, well, maybe it'd be worth making it an affordable housing unit and having a parks person living there in a studio who could help take care of the park. But I know that'd be equally expensive to create.
No more.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that what we're not looking at as a comparison is if we were building a restroom brand new on that spot with the plumbing, with the fixtures for the same sort of size, that would be a chunk of this cost anyhow. And so I see this as the add-on of having it be a historic building. So I am supportive of going forward with it as a restroom in the historic building.
Yeah, my only counterpoint would be, yeah, I understand the concern about the museum not being open, but at this point in time, we could design around that and potentially have the restrooms have a separate access from the outside that, so that people could access it when the museum wasn't open.
Yeah.
I just think it's a smarter use of money and will result in a better end product as it relates to historic integrity.
Okay, well, we've heard some good dialogue on that, and I appreciate you bringing that forward, Bill. Let's see how the rest of the other two council members weigh in. Restroom, shed?
I'm going to go, up with restroom. I support that.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of my larger comments as far as this packet and the way you proposed it. You said restroom or shed. You didn't say affordable housing.
No.
You didn't say a crepe shack. Like, you didn't say sugar on snow. You said restroom or shed, and you didn't seem very excited for the shed, and it'd be you that's using it. So you didn't make me excited for the shed. So therefore, restroom seems to make sense for me. Albeit, Bill makes good points, but like, I don't have those arguments to make to really side that way, because this is the information you've given us and this is what you've said you wanted to do with your budget. And that's sort of how my feelings are on the other side of things. When you talk about money allocated for everything else, you say this is what you want to do with your budget. I have nothing to argue against that, other than to repeat and reiterate the caution of thinking about opportunity cost and what else you could do with that money and how to use it wisely. But I trust you and your department to use it wisely.
Well, thanks for leading into the second question. I appreciate that. And so we could put that other slide back up there. Is there council support for working the balance of the essential park improvements going forward into your future year budgets? I think that was really going probably 2 or 3 years, 26, 27, maybe 28.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
And yes.
Great.
So there you go. Thank you very much for the work that you and ComDev and Jen and everyone, Austin, have been putting into this project. It was and is a great partnership. It's unique in our community to collaborate at this sort of scale, and we hope for all the success across the board.
Thank you. If I can just say in closing real quick on our end, we certainly can come back in the budget cycle with refinements to a number of the questions that were brought up today. So I don't think this is a final decision, and you'll have those opportunities when we get into budget to really look at it one more time and confirm that the pool house and the budget will sharpen the pencil and make sure all of that looks good.
Okay, and I think one other thing I forgot to mention, small but important, is this may or may not be something that GOCO grants would be appropriate for. I don't know how recently we've received one, and, we gotta wait a little while before we ask for another one, or other projects that you're thinking are more prime for GOCO grants that are within your budget. But that would be good to know. I think we need to take advantage of any other types of opportunities to assist with the funding. And sometimes they're very responsive to what seem to be very joint partnerships. And I think this typifies that with private sector and public sector and nonprofit NGO like the Historical Society all coming together.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and Pete, is there anything that you need to bring to us that is not on the agenda by any chance?
Nothing for tonight. I would just say we have 2 meetings next week. The work session on the 12th is around the Western Mountain Regional Housing Coalition coming to present some information to the council, as well as Habitat for Humanity on their modular facility down in Rifle. And then we'll have a regular meeting on Tuesday.
All right, great. Thank you very much for everyone attending, and thank you, Grassroots TV, for covering our meeting. Good night, and happy Cinco de Mayo.
Mr. Special Counsel?
Saturday.
It's gonna look really dumb. That building's gonna look really dumb.